Welcome back to the Gold Club World Championship, where it's time for a match that I have been hyped about all week long. The rematch of the Eastern Clash Grand Finals, very nearly the BlizzCon Grand Finals, were it not for Fnatic themselves. Caldor, I'm talking about Ballistics versus KSV.
It's going to be pretty good, especially now that Ballistics has figured out that it's a very good idea to put SC on the damage. They are looking insanely scary, so if there's a team out there right now that can take KSV Black down, then it's definitely Ballistics, so it's going to be a good one.
I'm talking about the last match. In case you missed it, SPT were able to draw with Fnatic, and that was fantastic for SPT. It felt like a lot of the things that we've been wanting from them had been fixed throughout this week. Things like their drafting improved a lot, and then finally becoming proactive, putting mercenary camps out on the map and then taking advantage of the rotations to defend them.
And also running with the advantage, just not running into fights that were disadvantaged to them. They really made good rotations on the map happen. And Fnatic showed a few weaknesses. They looked really strong on the first map, had an insane isolation composition once again. And for me personally, from the entire week, the one thing that I feel still plays a bit of a role, I by no means want to blame the loss on him, but I think that when we're talking about the second support, that Benny still has to grow a bit more into that role. He looks fantastic when we're talking on the off-tank, when we're talking on the solo laner, but when we're talking about him playing a second support, he still has a couple of positional problems, sometimes a little bit later in Ancestral. Nothing too crazy, nothing that he can't fix, and given that he has made such a major role change into the squad, it's understandable that he isn't just on the top level yet, but that's definitely something where they can maybe improve to an extent where they can put the fight to SPT.
Yeah, you Europeans like to have that extra bit of added pressure to the solo laners, the melee flexes as we call them, by making them every once in a while flex onto a secondary support. And we have seen some amazing support plays in the time that Bad Benny's been on things like Rhaegar.
Yep.
But of course it would take time to learn both that as well as the regular role of offlaning.
It's a positional thing as well. If you're used to being the frontline tank for your team, the main tank, then you're all the way up out there. But on his Rhaegar performance, we've seen, for example, on Tomb of the Spider Queen against Dignitas, that he was just a bit too far out, and that allowed Wooby to immediately snipe him in one of the most important fights of that game. So it's just one of those things where he will need a few more weeks to get the positional standings right, to make sure that he also has the timings down and synergizes well with the team. But that was to be expected. Most of the teams have to make these adjustments, and we see it from other teams as well.
Yeah, Ballistics has been trying to figure out that adjustment too. It's something that we had noted throughout this week of group play, is that they have been bringing in Magi, who is the new support for the team. He didn't play support before. He was the ranged flex, although with the double support meta that Korea was running so frequently before BlizzCon, he was running a lot of supports anyway, so it was just slight adjustments there. But then trying to figure out, you know, who is going to go along with being that secondary support. Before at BlizzCon it was SDE, but we saw SC being on that, and that wasn't bringing the success for a Ballistics that we know. Yeah,
exactly. Ballistics had a couple of games throughout the entire tournament where they didn't look as strong. Particularly the series against Dignitas comes to mind. Dignitas played incredibly well in the series, but it just felt that Ballistics was a little bit off. And it really came down to them all of a sudden running SC on a second support in most of these cases. And once they started switching back into the damage role, they all of a sudden just looked like a completely different team. And I talked to them a bit, and of course there is a bit of a language barrier still, but they immediately said like, oh yeah, it's much better right now. We feel way stronger, we are more aggressive again with how we approach that. And I have to say, in some of the scrimmage that I just watched today, they looked insane.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure if they're going to bust all of the strategies out that they've practiced over the last couple of days, if they're going to try and keep some hidden so they can use them in the playoff stage. But some of the matches that I've seen, the level of aggression was just absolutely unrivaled and way, way above of anything that we've seen so far in the tournament. If they at any point busted out in the actual play on stage, I would love that.
Even in the series they played versus Roll20, they looked absolutely lethal versus Roll20. And that was a night and day difference from earlier Ballistics, so much so that it feels like if they keep ramping up the way that they have been so far within this tournament, we might be looking at a new favorite. I hesitate to say that too fast. Let's see how they do versus KSV, but they did look that good. They were just fluid, very solid, and very aggressive in their drafting. Going from the double support with SC on that secondary support, all of a sudden drafting things like, even triple melee, triple warrior, and that's because SC can play things like Zeratul, can play even the Tyrael every once in a while. If Jungha needs to play something else, they have the flexibility from that, and they can play those aggro melee compositions when it suits them.
Yeah, and we have seen, especially when we're talking about Sky Temple, very aggressive compositions, and we are going back into that heavy Tyrael-based style that we love from the Asian regions. And for the longest time, it was basically China that was incredibly in favor of him. They still do that with Greymane, but right now it's more so even Ballistics than KSV Black, who really love to draft that Tyrael and go straight for boss control, zone control, combo it off with Greymane, who is of course the main damage dealer currently at the tournament here, and it's just fun to watch that style.
Yeah, definitely a hero that's going to be contested, highly contested from both of these teams will be that Greymane. We'll have to see about Rhaegar too. It seems like as Ballistics swaps into more of a solo support style, they're playing less and less Rhaegar, but because Ballistics favors that Tyrael so highly, it sort of makes up for them playing less double support because they still are able to utilize him for his shielding and the sanctification. But teams have also figured out a way to work around that with things like the Stukov.
Yeah, Stukov was one of the heroes that I personally actually expected in the last series when Fnatic was playing instead of Uther, because it very much hinted towards that combo that we've seen. Nubarok was banned out, but he can play a very similar style with Arthas as well.
Right.
You have to play the engagement a little bit different, but it seemed that Fnatic was more so worried about being sniped with that burst damage on Jaina in particular, and then decided to go into Uther. Didn't really work out the way that they wanted there, so definitely a few adjustments that have to be made on their part. But also when you look at the progression that they're currently making, it hasn't really shown so much in the last series, but they have some more aggressive styles that they're currently falling back into. So it's really a huge adjustment period for all of the teams that made these changes. Dignitas is also all the way up there. They are experimenting quite a bit as we're heading into a new patch with the playoff stage as well, which of course is going to have another huge impact here.
Yes, there's only 2 off days, so really important that the teams are both switching out their times to make sure that they are still keeping up with this patch, but then making sure that they're ready for the next patch. Here they are, Ballistics, the Eastern Clash Grand Champions. And except in League play, these two teams have not played against each other since then. Like I said, we almost got that Korea versus Korea Grand Finals at BlizzCon, but Fnatic decided that wasn't an option. They took out Ballistics.
The fun part about that is if you talk to KSV and ask them why exactly that happened, they immediately will tell you that the one thing that Ballistics did not do was respect ETC from Breeze enough, and they got punished for it. So it's actually really interesting to hear the point of view from KSV. And they said like, yeah, if you don't respect Breeze and if you don't respect how strong he is on ETC, then you can't complain if you're getting taken apart.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it was more Stitches ban. So still a respect for Breeze, but more of the ban on Stitches there, not wanting to deal with the hooks of Stitches. We saw that in Game 1 for Fnatic. He's pretty good on that hero too. Here is KSV. They're all pretty good in these roles. This team are current global champions, hoping that they can make it through with only losing a single game. They'll need a 2-0 victory here to do that.
Yeah, so far they have played a fantastic tournament. They had the hiccup against Fnatic, but they have been insanely strong. But for me personally, this is really the story where I want to see how Ballistics trades into them, since I feel ever since they made the change with SC, but also just watching their practice regime, they feel like they are currently just ranking up again stronger and stronger. And I just want to see if that's already enough to take KSV on and beat them here, as we are still in the group stage, or if that's something that they can't achieve just yet. As we have Dragonshire as our first map, Ballistics with a choice.
Interesting to see Ballistics choose Dragonshire into KSV. When they've played each other before, it's always generally been KSV's choice. Rich really doing well in the solo lane versus Jungha, but with so many mobility-based heroes, even Ballistics bringing back in Zeratul, it hasn't really been as much of a 1v1 yet. We're starting off the first draft of this best of 2 between the 2 Korean Titans.
I'm pretty sure that the one-on-one on the top lane that you alluded to is something that we are probably not going to see here today either. We have an early pick into Abathur for KSV already, and that alone is a game changer. I was more expecting the Genji to come in and then quick rotations to help the top laner out, but Abathur alone is already going to take care of that top lane. Whoever is going to face off against each other in the solo, Abathur is going to be the one factor where if you move out too far, then a quick head can just help your opponent, and you might be in a lot of trouble here. So KSV with a lot of potential aggression already on the map.
Yeah, I wonder what, if anything, Ballistics wanted to take away from the synergy with Abathur, something like Genji, potentially, maybe the Greymane there, but instead they're going to make sure that they have Dahaka so that he can counter siege against that global pressure, and then a pretty early Lucio for Ballistics.
Yeah, and Genji is a really good point that you bring up, because together with Abathur, Genji is insane. But we still have also Greymane out there. So it's another fantastic target for a Symbiote, but also for a copy. And I love that we are having this shaping up with an early Abathur pick. That's definitely a case, we're just completely changing it up and saying, yes, with Abathur, we are so flexible on the map here, and he can be such a fantastic hero if you play him correctly. And I mean, it's already scary if you're just watching Rich on any kind of melee assassin, any kind of hero where he can just go into the backline and do damage. If he's assisted by an Abathur as well, it's just insane.
I'm expecting a Rhaegar here from KSV, but we'll have to see, both because of the earlier Lucio, but also he is great for the 1-4, being able to get Lightning Bond and have the extra wave clear there. Also, because KSV generally have, they're not going to do it here, but they generally have Kyocha playing Abathur. It does make you want to have Sake playing the supports that he is most comfortable on as that secondary support. But maybe they're going to do something like have Sake playing that Abathur. But man, Illidan and Genji, talk about aggressive, Kaldor.
Yeah, we wanted aggression. We're getting aggression. I expected to maybe Ballistics come out swinging here with an aggressive composition, but KSV is using that first pick that they got in the first draft to immediately go into Abathur, and now they're not going into Greymane, they don't go Genji, they go Genji Illidan, and all of a sudden we are really having them trying to bring the pain here. Ballistics reacts with a quick ban on Karazim, just trying to make sure that there's not another fantastic target for the Symbiote, and that KSV cannot jump into the backline with every single hero in their lineup. At this point, you have to also wonder about Tyrael, of course, once again. Another point that we have to still raise here is that wave clear is definitely at this, or is something where Ballistics with the next double pick can definitely get ahead of KSV if they want to go down that path.
Yeah, they absolutely can. There's still some options up there for them to get that, to get some more wave clear in. Do they, at this point, feel like they need to deny Tyrael, have Hooligan play that?
I mean, that's the question. There's still a lot of really good heroes up there when it comes to damage. For example, we talked about Greymane. You can pick him if you want to combo off Greymane with Tyrael. That would be a really good setup to go into. And with Tyrael, you can also then decide later on, depending on what KSV picks, if a Lucio solo is something that you feel comfortable playing with the added shield of Tyrael himself. A lot of teams would then opt to go into another support, but since we are talking about very aggressive Korean meta and great coordination within the fight itself, you can also then add additional damage if that's the way, or maybe even a bit of CC, which would still work here. Another hero that we can consider is also Cassia could be played, but overall, they could play definitely Tyrael and Greymane if they wanted. And Tyrael already picked, taking it away from KSV, but not opting into Greymane so much and going into Vala instead, which also leads us into the probable second support here on the last pick.
Yeah, Vala will definitely be wanting some more supporting help there. Though we'll have to see. It has not really been fitting Ballistics as they would like to play so far, but she does like that dual support setup. KSV final two picks, we need a main warrior for them. And then their support, knowing that Ballistics banned out Karazim, he's so fantastic at being able to dive along with Illidan and Genji, so they take that option away. Rhaegar is still up as another maybe hero for KSV, would give them some more wave clear too. Yeah,
that's the one thing that I'm a bit surprised about, that in this particular rotation for Ballistics, they did not decide to go into the support. Just simply because if you want to pick Vala, KSV cannot deny Vala to you anymore. That's just not happening unless they are willing to play this without a tank, and I just don't see that's going to be the case. So right now, Ballistics had a choice of going into their preferred support. They will most likely aim for Rhaegar here. Uther now taken by KSV together with Arthur's. So Arthur's definitely going to be that bank that's going to try and, well, slow things down here a little bit. And Arthur's is also, with a bit of lockdown, can be fantastic. There's another great copy also on Abathur. I mean, whatever you do with this setup, it's insanely good for Abathur. You can copy Illidan, you can copy Genji, you can copy Arthur's. Double Arthur's in the backline is just frightening. And the Symbiote is also fantastic on all three of these heroes. So this is a very, very scary setup. Any kind of 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3 can immediately shift with Abathur helping out. Yeah, it's a very flexible composition for KSV that suits the skirmishing that you know happens so much on Dragonshire. Not so much about the wave clear though. Ballistics do have Vala to try to push in the lanes. Let's see what this last pick for them is. Do they go back to the Korean meta before BlizzCon and get another support? Have just so many ways of keeping the team alive with Tyrael, with Lucio.
Or do they get something else?
I think you have to. I would be afraid of playing Vala if you don't have the second support coming in. And here comes Auriel over Rhaegar. So in this particular setup, they need to keep Vala alive. And you're going up against Illidan, Abathur, Genji. So there is going to be that massive dive into the backline. Now Genji's Dragon Blade can of course be countered by the sound barrier of Lucio. That can really help out here. But it's still going to be rough, and coordination is going to matter a lot. Then again, they have shown insane coordination, and especially the tutorial play that we see from Hooligan has been absolutely on point. So it's going to be a very intense match, but I think this is still something where Ballistics, if they play their cards right, can pull it off. And they also have, with Dehaka, very nice pressure up at the top lane, so that should work out for them. It's actually interesting because we had, for the longest time, especially when we were talking about the Easter Clash, the last one, Rich stating over and over again that he doesn't even understand why people pick Dehaka. He's just like, we have Illidan. He's better in any kind of scenario. So now he's back on it.
Yeah, not only Illidan versus the Dehaka, but Illidan with the Symbiote quite a lot.
Yeah.
And that should be a guaranteed top lane win for KSV, in which case Ballistics need to make sure that they are doing well in the 4-man rotation, or however they set up those bottom 2 lanes. Siege and set up opportunities, create space for Vala to be able to siege as much as she can so that they can win those lanes.
With the setup that we have, I am really wondering how Illidan is going to play this. I mean, this basically just like screams hunt. There's no cleanse on the other side, and you want to just take Vala apart. So Illidan could have a massive impact here, Auriel or no Auriel. Well, we have the game about to start here. It's game number 1 in the series between our 2 Korean teams, and all the way to the left, it is Team Ballistics. They chose the map here, gave up first pick, and now we have Magi on Lucio, Hooligan on Tyrael, Auriel played by SDE, Jongha on Dehaka, and SC on the damage with Vala.
In the red, KSV Black, with Tist playing Arthas Reset on Genji, Rich playing his Illidan, Kyocho will be playing that Abathur, which leaves Sake to support playing Uther.
And already a couple of adjustments here we have for Abathur, not heading into a symbiote build right away, but instead we are seeing him at this point heading straight into the Carapace, so trying to be a little bit more supportive for his melee assassins. And talking about those melee assassins, Rich is actually in trouble, and this could be a big problem. Yep, the drag connects, and he is down. Quick kill as SC blows Illidan apart.
KSV expecting that Ballistics would just go straight to their laning setup, but that is not the case for Ballistics. Excellent to see the swap out. Hooligan, though, is in trouble as Reset is to chase him down. Uses the shield. Magi comes in with a boot back, and he saves Hooligan.
I'm already loving this game. Aggressive from the get-go. We have Barret Assault on the side of Illidan, so it's going to make it a bit more difficult for him to hold the lane here, especially since he's, of course, missing out on that wave clear. But it's that aggressive style that we expected with the composition that they're playing here. Really looking for the team fights instead. Illidan finds himself at the bot lane at this point, going up against Dehaka. And in the meantime, Magi is currently peeling a little bit and anchoring the position for the top lane.
Kaldor, I just love what Ballistics are doing with the laning setup here. A lot of times when they play versus KSV, and KSV has a dominant top lane, they end up having such a problem keeping their top laner alive because KSV are willing to dive at any length to get kills once they take down the front wall of the top. So sending up those good siegers that we talked about before we went into the game, putting Vala and Auriel up to the top initially to put some damage onto that front wall, start to rotate down, and now do the same thing in the mid. Just constantly making KSV react to their rotations and put them on the back foot.
At the same time, though, Ballistics is not really a spot where they get too much out of the Vala setup, because you can always make the argument that with an Abathur in the setup, you want to try and really push the walls as fast as you can. They got value early on in the top lane, but besides that, they are not really setting up on one lane just yet. Now, finally, the rotation becomes a little bit more traditional, and they might get some value down at the bottom of the map. Jongha at the top should be able to survive here. Gets good dragon against Rich and some extra damage. But what Ballistics is really looking for is trying to make sure that SC on his Vala is able to get some structural damage already to exploit that weakness that Abathur sometimes has in the early game.
And in seeing that so many of KSV had gone to the top, they're going to do that. They start sieging with the Vala and the Auriel. Unfortunately, they will lose Jongha here. There's just way too much pressure between Reset and Rich with the Abathur hat. We talked about it. That's going to be a problem for Ballistics. It only gets scarier once that wall is down, once there's no well there that he can tap to.
I mean, you are behind the wall and you think you're safe? Well, think again.
Not
because
so much.
They are willing to dive you, and they just showed that. Even Dehaka, then, yeah, he could not do anything about it. So Rich is already jumping in deep. That reminds me very much of when the European teams last year faced for the first time the Korean Illidan, because the one big difference is that especially Rich is just, he has zero respect for structures. He's just going in, and if you give him too much time, he will destroy your fort, he will destroy your towers, and the rubble that have been your outer structures is just going to give them more and more experience as they snowball the game.
Rich truly is a monster, made even more so with the symbiote getting adrenal overload to give him more attack speed, since Illidan is heavily reliant on that. And KSV's rotations have been very nice, at least keeping a hold of one of the shrines. But Dahaka is feeling comfortable to go back up to the top and get that one. And the laning setup for Ballistics has stabilized. Tiss is going to try to slow things down, especially since Rich is picking up the Giants here.
The one thing that I really like about the hybrid build that we currently see for Abathur is that it really emphasizes the early game. Because normally when you're talking about a symbiote build, you are on level 1 very much so focused on pressurized glance, which increases the range of the symbiote and reduces the cooldown. Especially the cooldown reduction is insanely important once that you had so much transference for hit points on level 13 and also the slow on 16. But it's something that really just kicks off a little bit later towards the game. If you're a bit worried about your early game and you want to make sure that you from the get-go can apply the pressure and also, of course, give that extra healing in, then having the regenerative microbes is actually a really good choice. But they still commit to the Adrenal Overlord, since attack speed just synergizes so well with every single hero in their setup.
And it's understandable, right? Because they're playing Abathur on Dragonshire, not typically where you would see a lot of Abathur play, although here and again KSV will play that there. But making sure that they can still be up in the face of Ballistics, be aggressive so that they can get a good setup in the early stages of laning, so that they can start to snowball the game. And that's what they're trying to do really hard as the rest of KSV starting to rotate in. The Hammer of Justice hits SDE reset, diving in, trying to get the Ariel kill, and they'll get it.
Ariel is down and KSV isn't done just yet. Illidan is just diving in and out, helped out by Abathur, but it's Arthas who dies next. KSV all of a sudden might have overcommitted a little bit here, because the entire set of Ballistics goes and they take down Uther. Reset once SC and he gets him, and with Vala down, this might turn as Illidan is just going ham.
Oh man, Illidan, Genji, and the Abathur hat. No one is safe as Hooligan falls. Rich still not done. Draga hoping to save Magi, and thankfully Jungha saves his support. But KSV are just running rampant across the map this first game.
It is so insanely awesome to watch, especially Rich on Illidan. And if then you have Abathur support on top of it, it's just fantastic. I love the rotation outside of Ballistics though, because they went all the way up to the top with 5 man and said, yes, in a 5 versus 4, even with Abathur, we have a good shot of winning that fight. The problem was really SC dying. Once that your damage is gone, Illidan is going to punish you. If you can't take him down with burst, or if you don't have the CC for lockdown, then you are in trouble. And that was very transparent, and Rich just played it perfectly.
Now that gets better for Ballistics, a lot better, once they get heroic abilities. Sanctification, Crystal Aegis, Sound Barrier. They could do things like Crystal Aegis, Sanctification on top of that, so you can't even abuse the positioning of the Crystal Aegis like you would be otherwise, as long as it's a well-placed Sanctification there. So that'll be key for Ballistics in trying to make sure that they can keep SC alive, because if they can keep those long sustained fights going and not lose anybody there, then KSV are the ones with the solo support Uther, and that's another reason why you get that extra healing from Abathur trying to help out with that.
Yeah. We have Metamorphosis, by the way, taken for Illidan. It makes perfect sense, but I still would have loved to see the hunt here, just simply because Rich going full Illidan, full Superman into the backline would be great. But he has another tool that he can now use to stay alive, especially against the stuns that we have coming out of the drag. Isolation, he can dodge a Rain of Vengeance if he plays the cards right. So this is definitely the better choice, but it would have been a lot of fun to get them even more aggressive here. But right now, they're playing a perfect game. They have massive pressure up at the top lane thanks to the camp they took earlier and escorted. We see in the mid lane on the minimap right now, even Arthur is anchoring the position of Illidan to make sure that he doesn't get ganked. So Rich knows that he's safe, as we have Ballistics moving down to the bot lane, showing against the fort in a 4-man, and KSV reacting immediately as Tiss is going in. We have Genji doing a little bit of damage. Reset is, of course, very well aware that he easily can jump out again.
Yeah, all he's trying to do, all of KSV are trying to do is just push back Ballistics. And Tist watching to see if he can do that, still hoping to anchor for the Illidan in the top lane. Trying to make the top area a no-fly zone for Ballistics. Keep them contained here in the bottom lane.
Illidan, Rich is dying. He goes down. Rich is down. Isolation connected. by Dehaka, and that resulted in him falling. And that's actually really impressive play here by Dehaka, by Jongha, because in this situation, the one important thing to note is that Illidan, up to that point, put on a clinic on that top lane.
Oh, Jongha stalking in 2, hits another drag. Divine Shield has to be used just to keep Uther alive. Kyocha's clone now is dealt with. The Giant stolen by Ballistics, taking advantage of the fact that they're finally able to rid of that Illidan, bring down the Dehaka, and steal away a camp from KSV.
Now at this point, Ballistics has to be a bit careful because Dragon Blade wasn't used. We had the sound barrier activated. You have a double support, so it's not the end of the world, but you really want to be a bit careful engaging into a proper fight now. If possible, they would want to avoid it until they have sound barrier back up. Divine Shield was used on Uther as well, but it still would be the safe play to make sure that they're not engaging into anything too heavily, unless they are forced here. The problem for Ballistics, I feel, is that we are back to the status quo. Illidan has retaken his position at the top. Abathar is already helping out, and that's the big problem. Illidan always gets the assistance of Abathar, and he is going to at some point start to threaten Keep quite severely. And then Ballistics have to either pull the trigger in the 4-man, or they have to send someone back to help our Jongha and Dehaka to face them.
Yeah, Illidan is such a problem for Ballistics, but they do have the global advantage and no hunt from Illidan. If they could get a setup where they bring in Jongha, try to drag someone really fast, force a fight that's scary enough that brings back Illidan too, and then try to get kills before he gets in, might be something that Ballistics can use to their advantage.
I'm really worried now for Ballistics though, because the early game for KSV went actually really well with 4 kills against 4, both teams on level 13, and that means that Abathar now has so much transference, and that alone is such an amazing tool if you are playing with an Illidan. And yeah, he's always going to be super close. He's going to get that extra value, that sustain on lane, and that makes this combo with Abathar and Illidan at the top lane even scarier. And now I really want to see how Ballistics reacts to this, because they can't just simply, they can't keep this up. They can't just simply say, okay, this is fine, because they are losing already the first tower. Dehaka is constantly pressured back, and if they allow Illidan to continue that little game that he has up at the top lane with Abathar, then in the long run they're going to lose out.
Yeah, and because of the Mule, it's taking Ballistics way longer than otherwise to take down this fort. Ballistics have finally gotten a double camp pressure, but KSV has had enough. They come in, going after Jongha now. Tis sitting on top of him, making sure that he's slowed. Isolation comes out, trying to keep Illidan from taking down Dehaka, but with the swift rotation to the top lane, KSV is working on that top keep. Should go down. SDE and the rest of Ballistics hoping they can stop it, and they do push back KSV. The threat of that death bridge was enough to save the keep for now.
Yeah, they weren't willing to commit because they didn't actually see that Vala did not go back in time. So we had SC waiting before he actually committed, and with the 2 supports they could have gone for it. They didn't know that, didn't have the vision, but they can still commit to the fight and turn it if they want to. Illidan gets the lockdown, they go for Ridge, but with Abathar in, he can start to turn this if they want to. The problem is that Genji isn't with them just yet. So as soon as Genji makes the transition into the mid lane, I'm pretty much sure that we're going to see a fight here.
There was a beautiful Howling Blast. The stock came in, drag 2, Sanctification on every single member of Ballistics, but the Dragon Blade and the threat of KSV has started. A sound barrier to allow Ballistics to keep living through this. This is what their comp was meant to do, and they push back KSV.
Great Rain of Vengeance here also from SC. Was well played, and he locked down too, so they get the damage out. And with Uther dying before he could use the Divine Shield, that was a big problem. So great coordination by Ballistics, threatening the setup that KSV is running, and that allows them also to retake shrines so that they are now in a position where they can start threatening the Dragon Knight. But Ridge, again, just getting the assistance here and immediately scaring Tyrael off.
Love that both of these teams know exactly what they need to be doing with their compositions. KSV almost got that early keep, but this is another drag that gives a kill to Ballistics, starting to start the staggered deaths of KSV.
I really think that Jongha has already made very good arguments why he could be the potential MVP for this game. Not only getting the solo kill against Illidan earlier, but the drags that he is hitting and the timing of those, the isolations, they are absolutely on point. Always getting the most important target. And this is what eventually now leads to the first Dragon Knight for Ballistics. I'm really impressed by how Ballistics plays this. They are still under a lot of pressure, and their keep at the top lane is extremely low and should eventually fall. But what they are able or willing to achieve with his composition, how aggressive they are, even though they know how dangerous this is, especially if Vala gets sniped, is pretty cool. So this is an awesome game.
But KSV can continue trying to brawl. 11 seconds until the Dragon Blade is back up. Perfect Holy Ground splits KSV. That's going to make Tist use Army of the Dead. So the rest of KSV coming into the fight. Metamorphosis use, Isolation turn. Rich is just blown up.
Dehaka once again with the Isolation. I mean, Jongha is playing the game of his life, but Vala is down, and with SC gone, that's a problem, and a big one at that. In comes once again Genji, gets the kill, but gets obliterated by Oriel just a second afterwards. A 2-for-2 trade as the camp is pushing the top lane, though. This is the biggest problem, that Ballistics, yes, they're currently winning the fight, now having taken out Arthur as well, but if they don't be soon, then they are going to lose the keep at the top. I don't think they can save it anymore.
No, that's way too much pressure in the top lane, taking down that keep. No one's going to get there in time as the keep falls. KSV achieves their goal of getting that top keep, but they do lose a lot of kills for it. So they'll stay just behind Ballistics in experience. Man, that was crazy. I wondered if Ballistics would feel like they had to give up the Dragon Knight, because inside of that was Magi, who had Sound Barrier. But losing Vala there was a problem for Ballistics. They still were able to get a fourth. They've taken out 2 fourths, but it's KSV now with the catapult pressure.
Yeah. KSV has a catapult pressure at the top lane, so that's already big, because now they can also start to shift the game again and start with Illidan to pressure other lanes. But again, for me so far, Jongha is playing absolutely a fantastic game here.
Phenomenally.
Every time. The way he's threatening and controlling Illidan in these team fights is absolutely crazy. We have Illidan being in a bit of trouble already as he starts moving in. So he goes into the backline, starts putting the pressure onto Vala and onto the supports. Then he's immediately focused, allowing the rest of the team to move up and get some damage in. But he saves himself with the Metamorphosis. And the second he starts using Metamorphosis, you immediately hear Jongha screaming and saying like, boys, I got this. Goes in, hits the Isolation, and then immediately a blow up against Illidan. And that turned the fight in Ballistics' favor up to the point where Vala fell. Vala dying was a huge problem for them, but right now, threat at the top lane, forcing Ballistics back, and that allows a free clear at the bot lane for KSV. So very cool understanding that threatening Ballistics at the top lane is going to force a reaction that will allow you a little bit more leeway on the rest of the map.
So we'll see if KSV can be more cautious with that Metamorphosis and against the Isolation. Especially, they do have Divine Shield, so seeing if they can keep him alive, but there's 2 crucial Divine Shield targets. If you use it on Illidan with Metamorphosis, which in theory should make him more survivable, then you don't have it for the Genji with the Dragon Blade. So it is kind of hard for KSV to figure out where they want to use that for. But importantly still, having the top lane, they even went for Camp Invade and pushed along with that top lane again, drawing back a lot of Ballistics. Ballistics goes back to the bottom, having dealt with that, and they're getting the bottom shrine.
And Ballistics is threatening the early 20. They have done an incredible job when it comes to experience. And once they have their Storm Talents, they can maybe get another Dragon Knight and then really start pressuring keeps. And potentially even core if they are able to get a kill with it. So right now, KSV has to try to delay the Dragon Knight for as long as they possibly can, rotate around Ballistics, and make sure that they claim at least one of the shrines. Because Ballistics has already started to move back. They're saying, boys, we're not going to take any fights right now. We are going to wait for the Storm Talents, and we're going to see if we can maybe decide this game already, or at least get an advantage over you.
KSV, on the other hand, would love to pick Hooligan out here in the mid. But Ballistics hits 20, and now the game changes. Stepping out onto the map in the top lane. Vala always with Ariel there. In the bottom, KSV will just switch out, playing Ring Around the Rosie, Ring Around the Dragonshire, until KSV can get their Storm Talents too.
Yeah, and there's already a couple of really interesting setups with this now as well, because when we're looking at the level 20 talents, the first thing, of course, that we have to note with how he has been playing so far is Dehaka, who now has the potential to just about silence everybody in the team.
Because it's so melee focused.
And also we have Holy Arena taken on the side of Tyrael, so that damage increase, especially on Vala, is insanely scary. So their team fight potential has just absolutely spiked. And Jongha is looking for that drag. He wants it. But with Tist already moving back, Uther being around, so they back off for now. But KSV has achieved what they want. They got the level 20, so now they can fight on even footing once again. And that makes it also quite scary, since we're now having on Abathur the double support. And once that we see the hat on Genji and Illidan, or potentially Arthur's, that is going to be really rough in the fights as well. I mean, this game is everything that we've been hoping for.
This is like full support for KSV. Bulwark of Light over Redemption is such a risk, but having the extra 2 seconds of Divine Shield, they might need it right here. Detainment Strike is perfect from SDE. KSV ready for the fight, ready to take this out there in the top lane. Sound Barrier goes down. That's the first. Sanctification is the second, splitting apart KSV, but they dive back in.
The Holy Arena is already there. Here comes the Divine Shield as the Dragon Blade still active, trying to go in and get the first kill here, but it's KSV who's all of a sudden in trouble. It's Reedson that's getting low. Rich as well. The drag connects on Tist. Tist is in trouble, and he should fall here eventually, as we have Ballistics chase them down. Even Abathur cannot prevent that. The bot lane is being pressured hard by a double camp, as Reset is trying to at least prevent the Dragonite for now. And Ballistics, oh my, like, they are playing this so well.
Yes, Ballistics and all of the Korean teams that play double support are incredibly patient and coordinated with their supporting. To use Sound Barrier, then Sank, and then Crystal Aegis the way they did, very well coordinated. No overlap to get through that long fight. KSV were going for the jugular there. They set up the lane so that they could win that fight, go straight to the core because they'd already taken that keep down, and win game 1. Now this is a huge problem for them, losing their Arthas, trying to stop the members of Ballistics from getting a Dragon Knight.
Jongha just missed the first isolation. He was trying to shoot it from out of the bush so that he couldn't be in vision, but now the fight might turn around against him. Jongha is already in trouble, but the Sound Barrier is being used. It's at 5 versus 5 again. Rich gets the Divine Shield. He's trying to continue to fight once again. Reset is also low though, and this is a huge problem for KSV.
The dodge on Rain of Vengeance was incredible, but still, the members of KSV lose Sake. There's no redemption for him to come back up, so once he ghost heals, that's it. He's gone for a minute, just as Arthas comes back. Ballistics have control of both of the shrines. KSV is not ready to be done with the fight. Metamorphosis, he is stuck in every single member of Ballistics.
They are still going in, but here's the Holy Arena, and that is the end of Rich. Illidan goes down without Uther. There's just nothing to keep them alive here. Tist is in trouble, everybody is, but they keep SCSC alive as KSV is trying to blow the one damage dealer away, and they fail as the Haka eliminates Genji, and now Ballistics is on their way to the Dragon Knight and potential victory. 20 minutes in, and they are looking fantastic here. A 5 versus 2 on the map, and the DK to boot. They move into the bot lane, and they want game number 1.
The Mule has healed this keep up from the damage it sustained from the double camp pressure during the top fight. But even still, this late game Dragon Knight and all of Ballistics still being alive against just the Arthas, Abathur, and Uther of KSV for 20 more seconds. They make quick work of the keep. They're going on in, moving on to the core.
Absolutely unbelievable. Ballistics goes for the core, and there is nothing that KSV can do at this point. That Dragon Knight hits way too hard, and they are also creating the space that's needed here. Great performance by Ballistics. Insanely impressive how well they coordinated this. If you have Illidan with an Abathur in your backline, that's already creating so much chaos that it is insanely difficult to coordinate everything properly. If there's also a Genji jumping in with him, it makes it nearly impossible, but Ballistics never panicked in these fights. That was brilliant.
The fights were incredible for Ballistics. The top lane being able to stave off Rich as Jongha with Dahaka, I feel like spelled how that game was going to go, how well Jongha was playing, because let me tell you, I have watched so many Dragonshire games between these two teams with that kind of setup where Rich should be outplaying it. And yeah, he got the structure down, but getting that kill there at the top keep was the start of something really good. If nothing else, probably getting into the heads of KSV at least a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been talking about how Ballistics it has been improving the entire time.
Oh,
especially since they figured their roles out, and now they are so strong. We talk a lot about Jongha, but at the same time, SC, in those fights, just his positioning and his movements, there's two supports trying to keep him alive, but he's getting jumped by every single member on the side of KSV Black, and he was able to keep himself alive for most of those fights. He had 2 deaths, and you can't really blame him for that. To be honest, when I saw the setups, I was just like, well, Ballistics, they have the skill to maybe make that work, but let's be realistic here. SC is going to be in so much trouble every single team fight, and he was, but he only died twice, and they made it work, and especially once the Tyrrell had also a holy arena, it was perfectly timed. I feel you can make an argument that KSV should have waited for Arthas to be back before they committed at the top lane, but overall, an insane game by both teams, and Ballistic